What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the CrazyFaceUno Podcast, where everyone has a story and everyone's story matters. What's your story? If you'd like to support the show and help us tell more stories like the one you're about to hear, please visit CrazyFaceUno.com today, where you can purchase items from our online store or donate. As always, I'm your host, Shane McNeely, and boy, are you in for a treat today. It is my honor and privilege to introduce my guest today, an old friend, acquaintance from the Invisible Children days, Melanie Bitner. Welcome, Melanie. Did I say your name right?
Yes, you did. Nice job, Shane.
Perfect. That was the one thing I forgot to ask in the beginning. I always like to make sure I get people's name correctly, and so perfect. Well, welcome to the show.
You did great. No Melanie, you got Melanie, no Melanie, Melanie, no Melania, please. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing your story. As I kind of teased a little bit in the beginning, we first met through Invisible Children. You were one of our contacts when I was traveling through Indiana.
Yeah.
And you brought us to your school. Surprise, everyone. She is a teacher. And yeah, you brought us to your school and helped do some fundraising with Schools for Schools and allowed us to present to your students.
That was incredible. I was actually introduced to Invisible Children through another friend of mine who was a colleague, and her daughter and a bunch of her friends from their church decided that they were going to get involved. And once they told me the story of what was happening in Gulu and showed me the Invisible Children video, I was just compelled. I was in.
Yeah.
And so I talked to my kids about it, and they were only 5th, 6th grade at the time. I loop with my kids.
Yeah.
And they were really young. But I just felt like this was something that my kids could see that could help them to realize the world is much bigger than their own struggles.
Yeah.
And they really jumped on board and were so passionate about the movement. I was up in Chicago for the rescue for
Likewise.
A couple of different occasions. Sang out front of Oprah's studios.
Yeah.
I'm in the documentary.
Yeah.
That was something, going out to DC and working on the end and doing the lobbying. That was still, it's been a decade, and that's been one of the most powerful experiences. I'm still connecting to people because of Invisible Children. I've done a couple things and met with Jolie. It just spiraled. I have a friend who reached out who is at Notre Dame. I got an email that said hello from a Ugandan, and I was really. And so he was doing international peace studies. We're still in contact. He said, "Hey, whenever you're ready to come to Uganda, you let me know, and I'll take you on a tour of my country."
Yeah, that's cool.
So yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, Invisible Children has, it's funny, the stories that just come from it. Even us that have worked there and people that have, we've connected, and we've all been able to like have this, I don't know, it's just created such an opportunity with the connections that you make and the relationships that we've built. You mentioned a couple different things, and I don't know how much I've really mentioned. I haven't talked a whole lot. I mean, I have and I haven't about Invisible Children, but yeah, there was a couple of events that you mentioned. The one was the rescue, which I was actually in college, so that was my senior year, junior year. I don't know, doesn't matter. And yeah, we went to Chicago, so it was just this event that we put on, and ended up all around the country, and we kind of waited, and you had to get rescued by a money mogul, person of influence, or I don't know, what was the other thing? There was something else. I think it's just money or people of influence.
Yeah, and I think it started off with, somebody that was some sort of significant presence needed to go on to the media and make a statement about it. And so the person in charge at that point of the Chicago rescue was Natalie Warren.
Right.
and she was trying to get Oprah, and it seemed almost impossible. And then she got Oprah.
Voila.
And
yeah,
that was amazing. My kids in my classroom, we found out that I'd just been up there the day before, and they found out, like, oh my gosh, they're going on.
Yeah.
And they're trying to, like, literally shoo me out the door to drive to Chicago. And I'm like, you guys, I'm not going to make it in time. It's just going to have to be okay.
Yeah, it was cool. I was there as well. I was right there in the, when she did the broadcast and brought us on. So it was really cool to be a part of that. And that was one of the, I'd been a part of Invisible Children and kind of, helping put on events like you did for us when I started working there. For a while when I was at school in South Bend in Mishawaka there. And it was later, that was like a pivotal point. It was just something that felt so big, it felt so important. And I think it's, it's cool. Like you mentioned, that your students and them being engaged and just showing people the opportunities that are available out there and the ways that they can make a difference in the world and give back and be a part, and that the world is not just the little tiny school in town or city that we live in. It's so much bigger than that, and we need each other,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Melanie, fill us in a little bit on what you're up to today, kind of present day work and whatnot, whatever you want to tell us about that. You did mention that you're on a loop schedule with your students. If you wouldn't mind also kind of going into that a little bit and explaining more about what that is like and what that means.
Yeah, my capacity's changed a little bit. I have moved school districts.
Okay.
So I'm in my third year in a new school district.
Cool.
But I still teach 5th and 6th grade. That's pretty much been my thing. This is my 20th year teaching, and I don't know where the time has really gone.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel that old, and I remember my very first year teaching. Yet 2 decades have gone by, and here we are.
Yeah.
But looping is basically the concept of keeping students for 2 years, and it doesn't matter what those 2 years are. I've seen it happen from 1st to 2nd grade. I've heard of it happening all the way up to 7th, up through 8th grade.
Yeah.
So there really isn't an age restriction there. I found so many benefits to it because the kids get to know you. You build those relationships. You build the relationships with the parents. A lot of times kids will pull away a little bit toward the end of the year because they know they have to say goodbye.
Yeah.
And so we actually don't have to do that until 2 years
Yeah.
in, which, yes, it makes it harder. It's agony. There's nothing worse than staring at an empty room at the end of the year and knowing that time has passed.
Yeah.
At this point, I have a split class of 5th and 6th grade. They're all designated high ability or gifted, which I know you've had some guests on that are more in the special education realm.
Yeah.
And so what I'm doing is just kind of on the other end of that spectrum.
Sure.
So it has kids are kids in a lot of ways. I mean, it's, humanity is very universal. But there are some specific needs and challenges and things that I try to do.
Sure.
I was that kid. I just tell them, I'm like, look, I'm the grown-up high-ability kid, and my name gets to be on the door. But I'm so much like you, and I really want to be able to help you. And so we've got some really magical things that happen when you get to have kids for 2 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. 2 years. Is that like a common thing in Indiana or in South Bend?
No, it really isn't.
Okay. I don't really hear that much. I just didn't know.
The thing is that it can work really well, and it's free. It doesn't cost anything to have teachers stay for 2 years. So it can be very enticing, but you have to have the people that are dedicated to being with the kids for 2 years, not having a problem with learning 2 different grade levels of curricula, which I don't mind. It's really fun. But when I was in South Bend, I taught with my husband for 14 years in the same building.
Nice.
That was really unplanned. but it ended up working out really well. We almost ended up as an extra set of parents because our school was very high poverty, high minority. There was a lot of trauma, just a lot of need, and it was good. It was good for the kids to have two of us there, along with all the other, staff and people that were doing similar work to what we were doing. But that offer was put on the table for people who wanted to do that looping. And it came and went while I was there. My husband and I remained consistent doing it as long as we could. There were a couple toward the end. We had to make some shifts, and so he and I both ended up in 6th grade. And that worked out just fine.
Yeah.
And so now what I'm doing is the class is basically half 5th grade, half 6th grade.
Okay.
And so they stay for 2 years, but every year half of them are continuing on and half of the kids are coming in new.
Yeah. Yeah. Which makes sense. I mean, but it's kind of nice too. I mean, it gives you, instead of having to, as a teacher, like every year have to relearn everything and like that baseline is already kind of formed,
right?
For half of your students at least. So it also provides a little more brain space probably for you to invest into students that are new coming in.
Absolutely. And it's been really nice since I've changed district. My class size is actually smaller.
Yeah.
And that means I can get to know the kids faster. I can get to know them more personally.
Yeah.
So, and this year I only brought back, only 7 kids returned.
Really?
The 6th grade class that I had last year was a little bit bigger, and the group that I had that were 5th grade were smaller.
Yeah.
So I brought in 14 of my 21 are new this year.
Wow.
But man, there's just something magical. I mean, by October, we were on lock, and the things that they do for one another is just incredible. There's no drama. They're incredibly kind to each other. It's something to see. Sometimes I just stand in the room and just look around, and I'm like, wow, I don't even want to move for fear that I like break the flow of just, there should be like swirling glitter or something. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's really awesome. What classroom size? You mentioned classroom size, and I don't know, in my personal opinion, and I would love your input or your thoughts on this, but I feel like it's so important. It's so hard. I see, in Minnesota, there's some high school classrooms that were like over 30 kids, like in certain classes. And it's like, man, you've talked about relationships already and building these relationships and having these. And I feel like that should be a priority and something that's important in the education world. And I think that classroom size is a big component to that. Do you have any thoughts or opinions on that?
Oh, when it comes to education, I have opinions on pretty much everything. But yeah, I agree that class size really does make a difference. There's there's a sweet spot, I think, of anywhere between, I mean, if you can get into the teens, I mean, that's just unbelievable.
Right.
And I do think that, on these lower grades, kindergarten, when you're really getting them started, and truly there's so much brain development that should have already taken place in kindergarten. Mm-hmm. But the world is hard. I do think that since the recession way back in 2008, it's still affecting us, and it's still affecting our most vulnerable populations.
How do you see that? Like, what do you see the effects of that now? Or like, how do you...
I feel like wages still have not gone up enough. And when you have what we call unskilled workers, which, and I don't even know what I think about that anymore. It's gotten to the point
verbiage.
Where... Yeah.
I don't like that verbiage.
Each of us has a capacity to contribute, and the way that we define work, I think, really needs to change.
Yeah.
So we have the minimum wage that's been very stagnant. Mm-hmm. We have this gig economy that people are trying to piece together enough to take care of their families.
Yeah.
There's just a lot going on, and so when you send your kids to school, your teachers are tasked with a lot of things. Even when you have a very supportive parent, that doesn't mean that they're able to do all of it. Even in our more suburban or affluent schools, those kids still have their own struggles.
Oh, yeah.
And And I really feel like as you head into adolescence, we're really dropping the ball as a nation with education, because the brain research is showing that that adolescent mind is changing and developing until you're 25 years old.
Right.
And so to leave these kids kind of hanging in a room where there's 30, 35 people and you're changing classes every, 45 or even 90 minutes, it's still, there's not enough time for the teachers to be able to reach out and do all that needs to be done. And people just want to be connected with.
Yeah.
Our students, they need that. And they hide so much of their pain.
Yeah.
And they even hide what they love and what they care about. It's just everything is so masked. And I feel like we can do a better job.
Yeah. And I think that this time of year or time of the world, I don't know, is, it's like it's literally like a technology revolution, and we're in the beginning stages of that. And I don't think that we fully understand the ins and outs of that and how that's affecting, people. And you're getting it at the 5th and 6th grade level, but man, it's starting so much earlier now. Like when I was first grade, and I remember the new Apple computers that we got, and you got like to do a few things on there, and then came PowerPoint was the next big thing, and like 6th grade, and and now it's like it's a technology world. I don't know if you guys do, but I know a lot of the middle schools, a lot of the schools in Minnesota already have, iPads, and they do a lot of the work on iPads through Schoology and through these different things. And the technology is very beneficial, right? It helps in a lot of ways, but there's still repercussions to that. And still, there's still pieces to that. And we haven't figured out all of those things out. And I think that plays into it as well, personally. But but I think that the biggest thing that we're lacking in some ways, and honestly, this podcast is one way that I want, or CrazyFaceUno in general is like telling people stories, right? We're losing this human connection in some ways. This like deep story, this is who I am. This is what happened. I mean, I've talked about it so many times on here, but when's the last time you sat down and just like told your story or talked about your life, and like with even your friends, even your close friends, it's like, it's just not something, this platform, this environment isn't widely, I'm not saying there aren't exceptions, but it's just not widely used and done. And I think that, technology's not going anywhere. It's going to be around, and why not tell people's stories and allow people to connect in some fashion through storytelling. So,
and there's things like NPR has StoryCorps, which those stories are incredible. The Moth Radio Hours is really cool for telling some of those stories, but those are a lot more structured. And then you hear from celebrities, and it's great to feel like you connect with someone else, especially someone that you see for a prominent reason.
Right.
But there's a lot of us that say, nobody asks you, what's your story? And sometimes they don't really want to hear it, because some of the things that are so deeply embedded in us are either the things that are really painful, or it's the things that are really wonderful. And sometimes you can be accused of being a little too optimistic because you're choosing to focus on some of the really amazing things that happen. And
you're not allowed to tell your story. You're not allowed to like tell your, the things you've accomplished and the things you've done. And I, another part of CrazyFaceUno is empowering, loving, and celebrating people, projects, and causes. Like that's like at the root of what we're doing, or what I'm trying to create, or what we're trying to create here at CrazyFaceUno is telling stories to empower, love, and celebrate people, projects, and causes. And we'll see how that grows and how we move into that space. But I completely agree. It's not something like, hey, let me tell you my story. Like that's off-putting, and I would be even off-put by that.
It sounds very enticing. Like, oh yeah, that would be great. And as soon as you start to kind of just process that in your own mind, all of a sudden it becomes, oh yeah, my story is a lot more complex than that.
Yeah.
How much do I really want,
To share
for people
and to
to,
show.
what is that sharing going to mean? How is it going to be interpreted?
Yeah.
You say one thing that's slightly taken the wrong way, and then next thing you know,
Yeah.
it's not even you're unfriended. It's you're sitting in a meeting and you're like,
Dang
wait,
it. Yeah.
that wasn't how that was intended.
Yeah. Yep.
But
You're
then,
100% correct.
But again, we're so quick to also turn around and do the same thing to others of, well, he shouldn't have done that or he shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
Again, it gets back to humanity. I mean, we are a very nuanced species, so I think we need to be really careful about judging so quickly and pointing fingers.
Yeah, I agree. And I hope that we can find a road to redemption, We all make mistakes, humans, and, I talked about that before we got going. It's like, well, if I mess up in the very beginning, I might restart the intro. But other than that, like, I just kind of roll with it, and
Yeah.
And I want this to have that organic, natural feel, and I think it's important just to show, like, hey, like, it's okay. It's okay. We're not perfect here. It doesn't have to be this polished thing, and like,
Yes.
This is authenticity, and this is genuinely what this is. So take it, leave it, whatever you want. But here it is.
Right?
But I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Melanie, as we've talked a lot about education. I'm sure we'll get back around to that as well. But let's take a step back and let's go back quite a ways. Let's go to childhood. How would you describe your childhood? What was your childhood like?
Oh my goodness, my childhood was a really mixed bag. I was actually born at the University of Michigan Hospital.
Okay.
In Ann Arbor, and my mom always wants to share the story that maternity wards have been closing all around the country because the birth rates were down. So that was kind of her only option. And I wasn't raised with a lot of money, raised with a lot of creativity, a lot of love, a lot of really good food, even when we were struggling. So I found I do show my love through food at this point. So which is great, because when you have a room full of students and you want to bring them food, they're good with that.
Yeah.
So my grandfather and I didn't see any of my grandparents a lot growing up. We were pretty isolated, and so I always felt like my upbringing was a little different. I'm an only child, and I literally have no cousins. So yeah, my mom is a middle child. Neither of her brothers had children, and so it was just kind of me.
Yeah. I can relate to that. I was an only child growing up.
Were you?
I have 3 cousins that came along, middle school, that 5th, 6th grade time, probably, maybe a little younger than that. And then I have a stepbrother and sister now, but yeah.
Yeah.
But I grew up as an only child as well, so only children unite.
Right? And I have a lot of them in my class right now, and I'm like, hey, a lot of left-handed only children, so we're all in that bag together. So yeah, I was kind of unique from the onset. I'm left-handed. I was born on April Fool's Day, so that's also a really fun birthday for kids to celebrate with their teacher.
For sure.
When I was 3, we moved up to Shavehead Lake in Michigan. Really out in the middle of nowhere. Like, we joke about parents and grandparents that tell these stories about having to walk so far to get somewhere. I'm like, yeah, that was actually me. I had to walk a half a mile just to meet my bus, and met my bus in another school district.
Yeah.
It was a 45-minute bus ride. We were like almost like the turnaround point before we started heading back into school. And I went there kindergarten through 12th grade. I graduated from there. That was kind of a mixed bag. I was the really nerdy kid who loved her teachers and more than her classmates.
Yeah.
But I think because I lived so rurally, once summer came or vacations, winter break, spring break, I didn't see any of those kids.
Yeah.
So trying to maintain a connection when you're gone for 2.5 months was a little tricky.
Sure.
There were neighborhood kids, but we were so dispersed in age. Like there was one girl who was a year below me, and there was another girl who was 4 years older than me. And we all still keep in touch, mostly through Facebook at this point. But you know, the one who was 4 years older than me, even though we don't see each other as much as I would like, we were in each other's weddings. Three of us all became teachers. There's something in the water. So yeah, education was always important for me. And because of some of the struggles that we had with my parents working in the RV industry, both my parents were electricians by trade.
Yeah.
But they were never in the electricians unions.
Okay.
They were doing more like circuit board kinds of things.
Sure.
For a while, they worked with one of the first companies to make underwater metal detectors, which was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And so my mom, you know, of course, being I say of course because that was kind of the reality that we grew up with, was she being female, regardless of her skill set, was never going to be invited into the electricians union. That just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And every year, right around this time, the industry would start to slow down. And inadvertently, about the time you're like, hey, everything's going to be good, one of them would get laid off. And so that put a crunch on everything. It wasn't even like, oh, I hope Christmas will be okay. My mother made Christmas magical every single year. She didn't ever need to make efforts to make bigger, better. It was always something special, you know, going to bed. She would always get me, my parents would buy me a book or a set of books. We didn't know that was an Icelandic tradition back at the time. We're like, oh, look at us being so cultural. But yeah, I mean, and, you know, waking up in the morning and you know, doing the stocking, that kind of thing. Yeah. She, regardless of where we were financially, she always made sure that I had what I needed, and ultimately that I had the support that I needed. So yeah, financially things were always a little funky.
Isn't that funny to like look back on though, and you see, I don't know, like for me personally, you know, like everybody, I mean, most people have at some point in time have like a financial thing that you're like, oh, but I look at my family as well. Like, you know, we did fine. You know, my mom had to work really hard at times, and I look at the sacrifices that my family has made for me, and at the time you don't think about the stress and like what that was like for them.
I always thought about it.
Did
always.
You? Always. Yeah, see, I don't know that I ever did it, but looking back now as I've gotten older, I'm like, wow, like, man, I'm so appreciative of the things that my mom and my dad and just my family like did for me and provided, because I knew that it was tough, but I think it was that, like, again, my brain wasn't fully formed. Yeah. I wasn't there yet, you know? Like,
there were some things that would happen and often enough that it was really obvious that we were struggling, and that just, it just never left me. But it also never left me, like, when I got older and I would be going off, you know, to stay the night with a friend or stay the weekend, and my mom would give me, you know, literally her last $20 on Thursday night, you know, and she would tell me, you know, I want to make sure that you have money to go to the movies or grab a meal. She would always tell me, if you can, try to save some for lunch next week. Yeah. And as much as I could, I would always try to do that. She worked incredibly hard. And I already knew, but there were years when she was dealing with so much abuse at work. She would sit in the parking lot and cry. Oh, man. And insurance, you know, in the 80s, insurance was probably not as good as it even was today. It was incredibly expensive, and so oftentimes she could only afford to insure herself. And so, you know, there were medical needs that were going on unmet sometimes. There was just a lot. And so for me, like, I learned a lot of what I wasn't going to do for a career. Like, for me, it felt imperative that I go to college. I've always been built for school. I was sent, even though I went to a very rural school, I was sent to a lot of opportunities for gifted kids and creative kids. Sometimes they would put a few of us on a little bus and send us to the other side of the county to go do activities. I mean, I learned how to do photography and neat things like that I still share with my students. And so I knew, like, college just has to happen. I wasn't sure what it was going to be. By the time it got to high school, it was looking like journalism. So I was editor of my paper in high school, and went to 2 years of college for that, and then didn't know what I wanted to do because I started to realize that I was not the person that really wanted to put a microphone in someone's face after something tragic had happened and ask some variation of, how do you feel?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I know how you feel, and I just want to be there to like help you and listen and can I wrap a blanket around you, and here's a cup of coffee, tea, hot cocoa, what works, and can I just be here to either listen or just be?
Yeah,
and
the empathy was a part of
you.
Yeah,
and I see how what's happened to news over the last 2 decades.
Preach.
And I'm incredibly grateful that that's not the path that I took. I feel like our people in media, the corrupt ones really are not helping, and the ones that are just really trying to do the best that they can to give facts and give truth.
Yeah.
They're getting beat up on the other side because people don't maybe understand that there is fact and truth to be found out there.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a rough industry. It's just like damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of scenario, you know?
And I think everybody's jobs are hard. I mean, I talked to my doctor, who's like very small town, like Doc Baker. It's like he is the general practitioner and his wife is his secretary. And he's talked about what it takes to renew his license and all the ridiculous hoops that he has to jump through. I mean, you're hearing about all these industries, and I feel like we need to talk to each other as a system of employment, because the system of employment and careers is really broken. And I think we're also stuck in our own part, of media is so hard and being a teacher is so hard. It's all really hard.
Yeah.
And I think it's gone beyond like, okay, well, having a job is hard. We know that.
Yeah.
There's something more, I think, underlying going on. And, it's not like a conspiracy theory. I think it's just things are harder and they don't necessarily need to be.
Yeah, and I think it goes back in some ways to just society today, and this new. I like to think of a lot of things. I think life is best when it's in this balance, right? When it's balanced. But
absolutely agree.
And it's like this pendulum that swings. We see it all the time, like the pendulum swings one way and then it swings the other way, and it's like in the middle is like this nice beautiful spot, but I feel like we're just, the pendulum's a little higher on one side right now, and it's got to come back, something's got to balance out, but it's hard to tell what that is.
I've stopped doing that. I feel like I'm in my 40s now, and at some point, I don't know how many years ago, I just stopped trying to climb whatever ladder that was there.
Yeah.
Because I think I was kind of done climbing the rungs of education.
Yeah.
I had considered becoming an administrator. I thought about being a principal. That concept doesn't bring me joy. I've come to realize that I think I'm best right where I am in a classroom with this age group of kids. Would I like to make more money? Sure, we probably all would if you're sitting in the middle class or below. And that, those struggling working gig economies, whatever it is. But I have just stopped that whole idea that I have to work myself ragged as some sort of sense of nobility. I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
I'm tired of living in a culture that promotes working yourself literally to death.
Yeah.
And that was part of the reason I switched school districts. I was working myself to the point that my health was paying the price.
Yeah.
And I had to be done.
Yeah, it's that life is a balance, I'm telling you. And
I'm
creating healthy boundaries. Yeah.
I have to do that with my students because, again, I think all kids have this, but high ability students can sometimes really exacerbate this idea of perfectionism and giving 110%. And that's really unhealthy. Yeah. And so I had to promote with them of exactly that, the life balance of, I don't believe in giving a lot of homework. There's plenty of research out there that says at this age, it's really not benefiting the kids. And most kids have hobbies. So why do I need to send them home with more work to do?
Yeah.
it also
foster
sends
creativity
really,
and
yeah, it also sends
exploration.
a really broken message of, most of your parents, when they work, at the end of the day, they come home and their work is done.
Yeah.
Their children, their work should also have an ending point at some time
Yeah.
that that is reasonable. Now, if kids are, I've had them ask, "Hey, can I work on this at home?" and they're excited. Absolutely,
Yeah.
go. I'm glad you're ready and you want to push on.
Mm-hmm.
But if I have a kid who says, "Hey, Wednesday, I can't do anything after school." Okay, then Wednesdays are just simply off the table for you. You don't need
Mm-hmm.
to apologize for that. We just work around it.
Yeah.
So if I have to choose between a hard deadline and teaching kids at this age about a deadline, or teaching these kids about learning and learning themselves and their own brain and having a sense of life balance, I'm not going to worry about the deadlines right now.
Sure.
I've lived by deadlines. Yes, they're there,
Yep.
but I would rather have a kid that is emotionally stable and balanced and is actually able to enjoy learning.
Yeah.
It feels like schools have kind of ruined learning. Like, the whole reason we went is so broken. And so I'm trying to untrain my students of, like, well, why would you really want to come? And
Yeah.
we just shift the whole paradigm in our room so that they are empowered, which has always been one of my favorite words for life and for education.
Absolutely. It
So we do
sounds
things
like you really foster this like really honest and a great place for students. Did you, like, if you look back in your education, yourself, did you have a teacher or anyone that you felt like kind of fostered that for you or inspired you or had your back or anything like that?
Yeah, I think they're all the way through. I was very fortunate to have really good teachers. I had a few that really were like, yep, this is what I don't want to do. You are not the role model I'm looking for.
Sure.
But for the most part, I can tell you every single one of my teachers from kindergarten all the way up through sixth grade. I can, picture my hallways at my schools and tell you who was in pretty much every classroom. I'm still friends with some of my high school teachers, and so yeah, they took care of me in ways that I know I will never fully understand. And again, I was an only child. A lot of kids, like, they have the benefit or the detriment, I guess, of having siblings, and just, there's somebody else that's kind of helping you make that name in that school system. I lived 20 miles from my school, and I was an only child. And I didn't think I was out to make a name for myself, but somehow I guess I did. I went back to my middle school after like 17 years, and my 7th grade science teacher, like, just took him a second and he knew exactly who I was.
That's awesome.
Wow, that's impressive. But yeah, my freshman English teacher, Mary, was phenomenal, and one of those people that just really helps to bring you into the fold of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And her husband was my art teacher for all 4 years of school. This past spring, I've been in touch with them for a long time through Facebook, but I actually got a chance to go and visit them, and I was able to buy a painting, an original Fred painting that now hangs on my living room wall.
Aww.
So
That's
yeah,
so cool.
I mean, that may as well just be a Van Gogh or a Picasso hanging on my wall. It means everything to have a piece of art from somebody who is so influential and such a role model and continues to be.
And what do you think? What was it? Was it just her connection, or her, like, what made her special? What set her apart? What?
And again, sometimes it was like both of them doing something similar but different. I think just letting us be ourselves. There was a lot of opportunity for us to explore things that we were interested in. Me having a really creative mind and her teaching English, it gave me a way to connect through poetry, just through free form types of writing. And she got to know us. She knew us as individuals. We did some career studies that helped to kind of guide us along. And she was passionate. funny. I think a sense of humor goes a really long way.
Yeah.
With kids, I think it just gives you a sense of you can lighten up. Um, it's fine to be serious and to care about things. I
Yeah.
care deeply about a lot of issues, so much so that I have to kind of tamp it down a little bit,
Yeah.
just so that I don't overwhelm myself.
Yeah, sure.
But I think there's, you have to be willing to laugh at yourself, laugh with others, make bad jokes and enjoy some silly puns, because otherwise what's really the point of just being so stuffy all the time?
You are literally one of my most favorite people to follow on Facebook and whatnot. The posts that you send and like the different posts you make with, I don't know, they're just like, you find the most obscure and like just cool little pieces that you put out into the world, and I'm always like, oh, that's so cool. I'm always like showing my wife, like, look at this, like, check this out, this is so cool. Like,
do you show her all the pictures of pretty shiny rocks that I post?
I like those too. Hey, it's all good. It's I don't know, I love all your posts, they're great. But
well, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know why that spurred, but like some of them are funny, and I love that, and I think you've got this sense of humor and this I don't know, that's great. I love that. As you kind of continue to, stay in the education world, I guess, are there any like moments or stories or things that happen throughout your time in like middle school, high school, college, whatever, that really stick out to you, that mean something to you or were fundamental or monumental in your life?
Oh, yeah. There's some really cool things, just little snippets of things. I am naturally pretty introverted. I've been told that I am what you would call an expressive introvert, that I can walk the walk of, oh, yeah, I can be in the midst of things and speak publicly, and it sounds really great, and that's fine. But unlike an extrovert where that's very energizing for them, that's really draining for me.
Yeah.
And I think that does come from, say, being raised in a very rural setting, being an only child, spending a lot of time out in the woods.
And in your own head.
Yeah, I've learned to listen to that kind of quiet voice. And say just my whole upbringing and having a mother who is very introverted, I'm saying it doesn't energize me. I can give and give and give, but then I'm like, ooh, I need a nap, you guys.
Yeah.
So I think, a lot of the things that I reflect back on that are positive are academic opportunities. When I was in 8th grade, we did a really cool little time capsule in our middle school, and I had to get up and speak a little bit, but I got to record U93's top 10 at 10, and that went into the time capsule.
Nice. That's awesome.
And I love music, and so that was a really fun little thing that I got to do.
Yeah.
Freshman year, I was in cheerleading, which is like so odd because I'm really good at it. I'm good at dance, gymnastics, and maybe I'm not probably that good anymore in my 40s. But yeah, I was really good at that. But I'm also, kind of jaded, a little cynical. And so it really was almost like putting the singer Pink in a cheerleading uniform.
Yeah.
And saying, here, go be Perky. So, yeah, half the time I was in it, and the other half was like, how do I not scowl about some of the things we're doing?
Sure.
And it was nobody's fault. It was just how I was wired up. The uniforms were super cute. But I was one of the only 2 freshmen to make the JV squad, which was like kind of a little feather in my cap. I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, it was a nice achievement. I felt like I really had to work for that. My senior year, I was editor of the paper. And I went down to Ball State for a week for journalism camp. And at the time, these news magazines were kind of the thing that a lot of the kids were talking about. And I wanted to give it a shot. And my teacher really was not for it at all. She really thought it was going to be a move backward. It was just going to be nothing but something kind of run off the copy machine with a staple, and it was going to cheapen what we were doing. And I'm like, no, that's not my vision. I promise.
Yeah.
And she said, I will give you 2 issues. And I actually found my own printer that was like an hour the wrong direction from my house or my school. I was like driving to Decatur, Michigan, to this little printer out in a barn in the middle of nowhere. The guy looked like maybe he was a cousin of ZZ Top, and just sweet. He always would help me. And I look back, I'm like, here's this like 17-year-old girl driving to the middle of nowhere to meet some guy in a barn. What was I thinking? Oh, so
the good old days.
I brought the first issue in, gave my teacher her copy, just kind of left it on her desk, and did my deliveries, went on my way. And next thing you know, I'm hearing from the other teachers in the English department, probably Mary, my freshman English teacher.
Nice.
And she said, your teacher can't show this to enough people. She's in the lounge bragging about how good it looks, how your vision has really come to life, that this is more than what she had expected.
I just got chills. That's so cool.
It was really, really powerful because even though she doubted me, and I think I needed a little bit of that doubt.
Yeah.
It empowered me to try something on my own and then see that success. And that's one of the things I love to give to kids is the ability to say yes to their risk and see how it pays off. You know, if it doesn't, really, what harm is there? It's not hurting anything if you fail.
Yeah.
You learn from it. And in this case, as an editor of a paper, like, what's going to happen? You don't like the piece of paper it's on, we'll change it back.
Right.
So
yeah. I love that. I love it's those moments when it's like someone supported you, you know, and you mentioned it a few times, like your freshman English teacher and you know, this story here. I have those stories for me come with athletics and my coaches. And I think it's one of the biggest reasons that I got into coaching. And it's one of the things that I loved when I was coaching. I'm not coaching currently since I've moved to Florida, but I loved, again, the empowerment of looking and saying like, hey, it's like you're in charge of your, you know, future, your destiny, right? Like it's in your hands. And
yes.
you've gotta go get it, and don't make any excuses for it. If you want something, go get it, you know. And empowering someone, and they're like, if you need my help, I'm here. I want to help you get there, right? But you have to tell me what you want. You have to tell me what you're willing to do and what the links are that you're willing to go. I'll help you. I'll be there, you know.
Exactly.
And having that support and having someone's back. I think that is, it's so important, especially at a young age. Those fundamental age ranges, you know, those middle school, 5th and 6th grade, like you're in, high school, I think are just some of those just key times in life where you're just trying to figure things out. You don't have a clue what's going on, right? And you don't know what you're capable of. And man, look at us now. I'm assuming we're probably all in about the same place, and I don't even know what I'm capable of now, you know?
Right. And I think, you know, that's a never ending journey.
Yeah.
My mom's philosophy of raising me was, I'm not raising a child, I'm raising a future adult. And that has just always resonated so strongly with me, because when I'm working with my kids, they're not adults. They should not be held to those types of responsibilities or thinking, but they're practicing. And so to ask them to practice making choices or being in charge of something or taking a risk and doing something that is a little iffy and a little uncomfortable,
sure,
but it's small enough that they can have success with it. And even if they have failure with it, it's not so destructive that they're not going to try to come back later and try it again.
Yeah, and it's a teaching moment even in the failures, you know, of like, look.
I want my kids to have some of that. That's part of why I did a lot of STEM training for about 6 years. I haven't done much since I've left my school district, mainly because the grant that I was working under came to an end. But I was doing training of teachers and students, doing a lot of stuff with STEM. And I'm telling you, if I really chose to go back and get my PhD, which I would like to, but I'm I'm not at a point where I think that that's going to be a choice that I'll make. There's just too much on the line. I'm not ready to like sell my house and move to Purdue and cut my income in half. And
sure.
But I really want to investigate the idea that I feel like teaching kids engineering, even basic engineering concepts, can reduce bullying.
Mm.
And it seems like, well, that's a really big leap. Like, how do we go from engineering to bullying? But I think because people can be
and can
so
you break down
judgmental.
STEM? What does STEM stand for again?
So STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math.
Okay.
And sometimes you'll hear it called STEAM, which incorporates art, which I think is fantastic because there's so much science and tech and mathematics and art when you look at geometric things and the chemicals of blending colors and different paints and mediums. So much in there that's so easy to embed. Mm-hmm. But the engineering process inherently invites failure. It invites, you make a prototype that's not a fully functioning model. And usually whatever the challenge is, you'll see something that isn't working yet. And I compare this a lot to kids with like video games. Well, when you're learning how to play a new game, your character's going to die. You're not going to pass the level. You have to go back through and you're changing a little something for next time. Yeah. Well, that's what engineering is. You're just changing small things until you get to the thing that you need. And you have criteria, you have constraints. There's lots of great language and vocabulary and thinking. But ultimately, it invites the idea that failure is okay because it leads you to the next step where you have this amazing breakthrough. Yeah. And I think when kids start to get over that idea of, it doesn't always have to be perfect. There's a next shot. It really frees up their mind. It frees up their emotions to not be so scared. And I think when you remove that idea of failure and fear and tamp that down or even completely just take it off the table, kids are willing to actually try and enjoy themselves in the process of trying. You see a lot of cooperation there. Yeah. But ultimately, I think this idea of it's okay to not get it right the first time, if you share that concept with everybody else in a room, well, these kids aren't nearly as judgmental. They're much more empathetic because they see, I struggled with this. And, you're struggling too. And whether they can give advice and help or just be there to observe, it creates a different sense of camaraderie in a room. And once you have those connections with the kids, I feel like that idea of bullying and judging and being cruel, I feel like that can really be reduced.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea or concept. I like it. I think there's probably a lot of truth to that. It's finding, it's like an environment that creates empathy in a way.
Yes.
Allows and it pushes the boundaries and it's great for the future. It's great for pushing people further, thinking critically, critical thinking and just common sense in some ways, and I don't know. Well, I love that.
And then you combine that, we do Genius Hour once a week, and that can be anything from kids taking a bunch of cardboard and building marble mazes to, right now I have a student who has a small cast of classmates, and they are recreating 4 of the scenes and songs from The Sound of Music, because we're reading a novel that uses that as a reference. And so these kids are like developing all of these different kinds of things and taking these risks. And say when they're in that together, and when you have a hobby, it feels like kids or people that maybe don't have a lot of hobbies or a lot of other interests, they just start looking at others and picking other people apart. I'm like, get a hobby, find something to do that is actually healthy. Whatever it might be.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. When you were kind of looking into, I know I'm skipping around a little bit, but when you were kind of looking towards getting your college degree and going into college, were there things that like led you that direction? Or I know you mentioned like journalism was kind of on the table, but how did you decide what you wanted to study?
Well, it turns out that I've kind of always been a teacher.
Cool.
And it's really, I mean, I can go way back to helping my teachers when I was little. Lots of kids have that experience.
Mm-hmm.
But when my grandfather on my dad's side passed away when I was 12, and that was the first time that we could actually afford to travel of any great distance because of some of the inheritance money. And my dad made a really smart decision of, you know what, let's go learn how to downhill ski. We don't like winter, so let's maybe find a way to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so we went up to Mont Saint Anne in Quebec and took a week's worth of skiing lessons. And when we came back, Swiss Valley is our local little ski area.
Right.
And we started to go there. And then by the time I was in 8th grade, we made another trip out to Winter Park, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Loved that. And 8th grade was when I started teaching out there. I started teaching the little kids where it was kind of part skiing, part daycare. And then my dad joined the ski school department and started teaching lessons.
That's cool.
And then my mom joined ski school. And then when I was 14, you were supposed to be 16 to be a ski instructor. But I was hired at age 14. And so the following season, I came in and started teaching all ages, school groups, private lessons for adults. And so I did that for 6 years seasonally of teaching people how to ski.
Yeah.
So much joy, and got to meet people from all over. It was like the perfect social network for a high school girl, which was probably more fun than one should have. But a lot of really fun memories, and
Sure.
just a lot of great conversations with my parents about instruction and how to teach people something physical, not just something academic. Your body is moving, you're on the hill.
Yeah.
You've got, it's you and gravity, and trying to figure out how to navigate that.
Mm-hmm.
And then my junior and senior year in high school, my art teacher, Fred, invited me to go over to the elementary school that was a 3, 4, 5 grade level, and it was within walking distance. He invited me to go teach a couple days a week over there. And so I was teaching art to like 3rd and 4th grade kids, and loved that, and showing them some of the master works and that kind of thing, and then having them emulate some of those. And then I moved to Texas for it's only a year. I actually got married down there. Married an Army guy. That lasted a couple of years. Just really got married way too young. No
Sure.
regrets. Good person, but just not the direction we were heading.
Yeah.
But I worked for Sally Mae.
Okay.
And so the first week that I went there was a week-long training to get you set and ready to work for this giant company.
Right.
And the trainer that we had there, his name was Central. And he was phenomenal. He was dynamic. He knew what he was talking about. And at that point, I was like, boy, education with like corporate training, that could be something I think I could do. That
Sure.
would really tap into some of my experiences and things that I enjoy. I like helping people. I like showing people new things. And so he really got me thinking. And by the time I left the following summer, I knew that I was heading back home, back up to this area, and I was probably going into education. Now, at the time, it was secondary education. I was going to go for social studies because I love history and civics and all those kinds of things. And I was really just kind of worried about being a role model at that time.
Sure.
I felt like I'd been through enough kind of traumatic experiences and just hard things. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm the person to be developing young minds. And then I was also really nervous about the math because I was not a strong math student, and I hate that because there's so many, this idea that women in math, and I'm like, oh my gosh, really?
Yeah.
But a friend of mine, the girl down the street who was 4 years older than me that became a teacher, she invited me to come to a professional development session on math at the school she was teaching at. And I left there just bursting with enthusiasm, and just there were so many breakthroughs. I'm like, why didn't anybody ever show me this? And I have my mom on the phone, like, grab a pencil and a paper and let me show you this lattice method of multiplication. And I was changed. And at that point I said, Mom, I might switch to elementary education. And she paused and she said, I kind of knew you would at some point.
Oh, that's so sweet.
I'm like, but of course, I'm like, why wouldn't you tell me? But that's what good moms do. Right. They let you come across your own journey and your own path in your own time and figure it out.
Yep.
And it turns out I am a really good role model. I had to come to terms with that. I knew when you go into teaching, I am going to be a role model all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just in the classroom. It's not just at my school. I will be seen in the community, and my actions will matter.
Yep.
And, not that many of my past actions are so terrible or questionable. They're very normal.
Yeah.
But it just, it kind of felt like I had to grow up, and it was time.
Yeah.
And I was really ready. I was ready for that.
Yeah. It's an integrity piece, It
really is.
Being a role model and everything you're saying, it's just having integrity. Like, it's being authentic, being genuine, both in the classroom and in your own life, and having integrity and just being true to who you are.
And I'm really bad at being two people. I've never been able to do that.
Yeah.
I'm what you see is what you get. I always joke, there might be a few more swear words behind the scenes, but
yeah, right.
Truly, aside from that, like, this is what you see in my classroom is how I act when I'm at home. It's how I act when I travel. It's how I act when I'm out with friends. This is really just who I am. And I think I had to come to terms with all of that. Having gone through things in school, I was bullied from about age 5 until age 15, in a variety of ways, in my neighborhood, on my bus, in my school. And I still, those things get in your brain pretty deep. And unfortunately, I feel like, why won't they go away? Like, I'm in my 40s. Why are some of these things still there? But I think because of being a teacher, I tap into those experiences to empathize and to guide my students. And so I've just had to come to accept, like, I'm good. I'm okay. I'm healed. I've taped over those cracks. It's fine. But I do have to tap into some of those things to be able to help my kids move through some of the challenges that they're moving through.
Yeah. I was bullied as well. And I still, it's something I don't really talk a lot about. And I don't know that I've actually have taped over some of those cracks. I think I just kind of masked it or tucked it away in some ways. But yeah, I've noticed that more so in the last couple of years. And as I get older, I those little things come up, and I'm like, why did I respond that way? Or where did that come from? And I'm like, I wonder if that has something to do with it, and it's interesting, but I love that. I love you even thinking about and trying to, like, figure out, talking about STEM and talking about some of these different, engineering and to combat the idea of bullying and to create empathy and tapping into your past experiences to, just share that with that piece of your life and that knowledge and that wisdom and that experience with your students. I think it's very important. Do you see a lot of that? Do you see bullying? Is it prevalent? I know it's hard to see bullying, I feel like, too. It's something we talk about, but it's a silent thing that happens behind the scenes, and it's hard to really see and pinpoint and know what to do.
I will say, I feel like when I was teaching previously, I was in a middle school, a 5th through 8th grade middle school for 4 years, and it came in a lot of different forms. And I think what we had as an educator, what I also had to be careful of, and we had a lot of discussion of, sometimes it is just absolutely, it is bullying. It is targeted, consistent behavior.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's two-sided. This is like an argument. Like, you were both involved, and yes, you felt attacked, but verbally mostly, but you did something back. So this is a two-way street here. It's not the same. So I felt like I saw a lot more of that. And it wasn't up until the last few years at my school. And the school that I was at did not have a good reputation. People would kind of cringe a little.
Yeah.
That wasn't what was happening in our building. Fights were quite rare. Not to say they didn't happen, but they happen in every school because, well, you have hundreds of people. Statistically speaking, you're going to have some conflict sometimes. That's just how it's going to go.
Yep.
And you have developing minds and decisions that maybe don't go so well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, and I was there, granted, I was also there for 14 years. I've only been in my new school. This is only my third year.
Right.
And within my room, I guess that's where I felt like what I could control.
Yeah.
Some years were just a lot of drama. People just talking about one another or making threats or saying really vulgar, disgusting things.
Yeah.
And you just kind of work through it. But you're right. Some of it was absolutely bullying. Some of it was, a one-time thing and then it ended.
Yeah, just a conflict. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's where building the relationships with kids and helping them to navigate, even at that age of like 10 to 12 years old, like what's tattling and what's reporting. And being able to figure out the difference, that's hard to do. And so I would have some kids that would kind of over-report, but I would rather have them over-report and then I can kind of correct a little bit of, okay, well, let's think about it this way. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, just really, being a counselor in that capacity, being a listener.
Yeah.
People have said, oh, you make such a good counselor. And that's really nice, but that's counselors at this point, especially in middle schools, they are much more like scheduling, doing testing at the high school level. They're getting kids ready for college. They're not really doing the sit down, talk with kids about their emotions kind of thing.
Sure.
That the job has changed. And I feel like if I were going to be a counselor, I wouldn't see these kids. It's because I work with them day in, day out,
right,
that they trust me. That
you get
trust
to build
is
those
built
relationships. Yeah,
because we're together. So yeah, at this point, the classrooms that I have, bullying has really not been an issue, or it's been really short term, because a lot of the kids, they'll come and talk to me because they trust me and they know that we'll take care of it.
Yeah.
And they've also, they've heard about some of my feelings and my struggles, and they're like, well, I like you and I don't want to see you hurting, so
yeah,
why would I want to do that to somebody else? Or I wouldn't want somebody to do that to me. It goes back to that really simple golden rule concept. But we just tend not to let things fester for very long. We just try to kind of tackle them fairly, gentle, but head on. And then we try to put it away and move on as best we can.
Yeah. 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 That's awesome. I think I just don't know. I'm not in touch with enough of that, and I worked in schools and special education, kind of some of the people that you've mentioned you saw that I've had on the podcast and whatnot. But, so it's just different there. It's not the same.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't have that connection to that. I just have my experiences from middle school and just knowing, man, it was just hard. And, I some of it's made me who I am today, in good ways, right? Like it's made me, it forced me at some point in time, I had to stand up for myself, and I learned that, it's okay to stand up for myself and to protect myself and whatever. And then, I don't know, there's just different things, different aspects to that. And just that empowerment piece, I think is huge too, of within the world of education. It's just an interesting time. It's an interesting thing to deal with. And, there's a lot of talk, and I think, it looks different these days as well, with, again, technology and the internet like we have it today. But
I'm so glad that I didn't grow up with social media.
Me too.
I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah.
It would have been too much, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm in touch with a lot of my former students that, are high school, things like that. And a lot of them, they don't use, they have selected, like, I'm not on social media very much.
Yeah.
Like, hey, here's, one of my girls I recently ran into, it's her junior year, and She's like, yeah, I'm not on any of it. So here, we can maybe we can text each other, but you won't ever see me like on any sort of social media. And I'm like, you know what? Good for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Simplify your life, because what's out there probably isn't necessarily what you want or need right now.
Absolutely. I wanted to pick your brain and hear some of your thoughts maybe. I have my own, things. I think that the millennial generation gets a bad rap. I think they get beat up on a lot. And, there's pros and cons to every little groups and whatnot, right? But I would love to hear maybe just some of your thoughts. And we get this entitlement idea, and people talk about this all the time. And, we just kind of touched on the social media aspect of things. And this is kind of one of the first groups that's kind of going through that. And just this time, what are your thoughts on the millennial generation and, I don't know, just where the world will be with them in it?
Yeah,
as leaders?
I have found in general that I really don't like the idea of grouping people by generation at all.
Sure.
We're seeing this okay boomer thing have a slight surge right now, and I even find that offensive. I'm a Gen Xer. My mom is a baby boomer, but my mom has even said my way of thinking and wanting and way of that I would like to see things done in our society. She said, I think much more like a millennial. Mm-hmm. And the okay boomer thing, I think that, what the person that both of them, okay, it was a quick little quip. The person that was, called boomer said something that was fairly out of touch. Yeah. But that's not every person from that generation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same thing with millennials. There's people from every generation that are entitled because of how they've grown up, whether it is, money or privilege or both or whatever, narcissism, selfishness, whatever got them there. I really don't necessarily think that when you're born is a bigger factor than socioeconomic status, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I know plenty of millennials that Invisible Children was a great example of a movement that was led by millennials. 100%. I was like 10 years older than most of the people that were there, that were hardworking, compassionate, caring people. Yep. So yeah, I just because they've grown up with certain pieces of technology that people from a different generation created to make their lives easier. Like what?
Exactly.
Why are they to blame for this?
Yeah.
This is like the everybody gets a trophy. Those kids that grew up with that, they didn't ask for that.
No.
There were a set of adults that, from what I can tell, are from my generation, that were the ones that were so worried about their children feeling left out or getting their feelings hurt, when that's the reality. We don't all come in first. That's just how things are, and that is okay.
Yep. It's okay to lose. It's okay to not get what you want sometimes.
Yeah. And I don't think that any human of any age needs to be destroyed and completely broken down to understand how the world works.
Absolutely.
But I think there's a time and a place for small disappointments and failures, and just, hey, this just didn't work out.
Sure.
So that they can grow from that.
Yeah.
So yeah, this has been a conversation that I've been having for a while with people. I really don't like the idea of pigeonholing people by generation.
I can appreciate that, and honestly, I brought it up because I had a feeling that you would have an opinion similar to mine or similar to what you just said, and I don't know. I just think that one thing I continue to say is I think the world's in good hands. The millennial generation is a very empathetic group of people that want to help the world, and I think they get a bad rap, and I don't think it's fair.
I agree.
I just thought, you're a teacher, you're in the education world, you see these students and the way that they're, you've been a part of this generation, the millennial generation. I'm kind of a millennial. I'm on the very front side of that, but I don't really, I have some tendencies for sure, but I don't know. It's just interesting. I find myself in the middle there, but just in general, I just think that they get a bad rap, and but I agree with you that, kind of just pigeonholing people into these specific tribes is problematic.
And I think if we watch, is this the kids, the generation right now that's coming up? Are they Gen Y?
I don't even know, to be completely honest.
And I think if we watch, we're going to see them get a bad rap and talk about how entitled that they are.
Well, and all
like
the generations kind of have,
that moves through something that isn't touched by a world war, they're considered entitled. And I'm like, why? Because, say technology improved, our lives improved, how we shared resources improved.
See, this is my theory, though. This is what one of my theories is, like, there's these extreme things that are going on in the world, and these extreme things, we'll say, quote, extreme things that people, the PC culture and these different things that people are like within the millennial generation is kind of like taking a hold of and saying like, this is something we care about. And other people are looking at them going like, why do you care about that? Why is this such a big deal? Right. But I think that these wars, I think that the conflicts that have gone on in the other generations, it's something that people have rallied behind. It's something that people have it's been a higher focus, right? That's their thing that they got to elevate and be like, this is what we care about. This is what we get to stand behind. And the millennial generation is trying to find their place, trying to find where they can give back and where they can make their mark. And I think that this is why we're seeing some of these. And some people see it as low-hanging fruit or things that don't matter. But I think that it is important. The conversations are important. Whether you agree with it or not, it starts a conversation. It allows progress. And I think that that's important.
Agreed. And there's so many things that need to be fixed.
Yeah.
There's so many places to put your energy and your passion, whether it is in planting trees or helping children or helping the elderly or saving animals. There's a place for even the smallest things. And I think maybe that's what's nice is there are so many actions of small kindnesses that can build up to something really good. That it's, you're right, those small things, it doesn't matter if it's low-hanging fruit.
Yep.
If you're not the one to pick it, then it sits there and rots. So
Absolutely.
Those people that want to go out and pick that low-hanging fruit because that's what they can do or that's what they can care about in the moment, they're not hurting anybody. So
Absolutely. Preach.
The other thing is that I feel like, when we do talk about the baby boomer generation and we talk about our world wars, they didn't have the societal fragmentation that we have now. And I don't mean, we know that racism was alive and well, and sadly still is. But what I mean is that because we have so much more technology that people can choose to listen to the news and the entertainment and the music that they want to, and there's not a lot of common ground. There's so many gaps for differentiating experiences. Whereas if you go back and look when we had the draft, and granted this is much more for our men, we had men of all walks of life all coming together to defend our country.
It affected the women too, though, but just differently.
You're absolutely right.
Because the men went off to war.
Coming into the factories,
and the women came together in a different form.
There were women there as nurses, that kind of thing.
100%.
But as for the draft itself, we know that the draft at that point was done for our male population. Not to say our women weren't affected, because we absolutely were. But when you have all these walks of life coming together, then you have a united common experience.
Yes.
And not to say that,
and it was
I
hard.
love the idea. I don't love the idea of the draft, but I do like the idea of civil service.
Yes.
There is a tremendous amount of work to be done in this country, whether it's infrastructure, helping people. There's a lot to be done.
Yes.
And I do feel like this opportunity of, a year of civil service. People choose to do more, that's fine.
Yes.
That we would do much better bringing some people home to do the work that needs to be done. And then everybody shares a common experience. We've all been out raking leaves. We've all been out helping to rebuild a park. We've all been out helping the elderly. And then we would have a united common experience to stand behind. And it's not generally going to create things like PTSD, like a war can often do, where you come home, just shattered physically and emotionally, and have to rebuild from there. So,
and I think that that's it.
Hey, civil service, I'd be all about that.
100%. I think I'd be on board with that as well. My wife and I have talked about that as well, just kind of that idea or that concept. But I think that what you said with the conflict, that generation went through something that was so hard. It took such a toll mentally, physically, and then just forced to go back to the way things were, And I think that it's just, unfortunately, I think we just see things as like, well, my thing was more important or harder or whatever, worse or whatever it is, we've putting levels on these things instead of looking and being like, man, you're going through something too. I went through something. Yours is just different than what I went through.
Exactly.
Does that make sense? It's finding our commonalities of like, hey, you're going through something now and I went something here. This was my experience and this is your experience. They're apples to oranges to bananas, whatever it is. They're not the same, but they're still fruit. Yes. And I think that we have to stop looking at them as like, well, I went through something worse than you did or harder or whatever it is, and hey, that we have a common bond here and finding those commonalities.
Yeah, we don't need to compare our suffering. It's not a competition.
No. Melanie, we're at 80 minutes here. We've got 10 more minutes, and I'd like to just kind of work towards closing things out. I've got a couple more questions for you. What are you looking forward to most in the future?
Honestly, traveling.
Yeah.
I absolutely, that's the thing that my husband and I enjoy doing the most. And so I feel like at this point for my career and my academics, I feel like I'm actually satisfied with where I am. It doesn't mean that future moves might not take hold or other opportunities might not come at me, but I feel like I'm finally pretty settled, which is very strange.
Yeah.
Because I'm so used to climbing a ladder.
Yeah.
That I'm like, in this one way, I think I am satisfied with this arrival.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So our goal right now is to see all 50 states by the time we're both 50 years old.
Cool.
We're each at 46 states right now.
Nice.
So we still have to get let me see, Alaska and Hawaii, North Dakota, Nevada, and then my husband still needs to see New Mexico.
Okay. Do you have criteria for that? Is it you have to stay overnight one night, or what's the criteria?
Yeah, really it has to be, you have to stay and do something.
Cool.
Being in an airport absolutely does not count.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think even if you drive through it, because usually, you have to stop along the way.
At least once.
As long as you are driving and taking in the sights, that counts.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you ever think about your legacy?
Yes. And I think part of the reason that I think about it is because we don't have children. And so that means that my legacy will exist differently.
Sure.
And I feel really fortunate that I have been able to form relationships with a lot of my students that just with effort, but nothing artificial or contrived. I'm still in touch with a lot of kids. Mm-hmm. One of them is not even remotely a child anymore. She's 30.
Yeah.
I met her my very, very first year teaching back in fall of 2000, and I gave her a Student of the Month award in June of 2001. And we formed a bond where I had met her parents. Her best friend's mother worked at my school.
Yeah.
And so we just allowed a mentorship to kind of foster over the years.
That's awesome.
And now she lives 3 blocks away from me.
How cool.
I was her matron of honor in her wedding. She was at my wedding. My mom helped to coordinate everything. We planned. I did all of her flowers, and my husband officiated her wedding. So
that's beautiful.
I feel like she will be. Her name is Lindsay. She will be a big part of my legacy. We also have another former student who just graduated, who's actually playing soccer out at Bethel.
Oh, cool.
His name is Augustine.
My old alma mater.
Yep. And he he's another one that we've known since he was 10. And we will know him for the rest of his life.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So and that's just 2 of them. There are so many of our kids that our legacy is going to live on in how we have touched their lives. There's actually, God, I've forgotten about this, and I can't believe how I would forget. Several years ago, one of my students, his mom was pregnant, and his cousin was in our class at the time and came in during lunch and said, "Hey, Christian's mom had her baby." And I was like, "Oh, really?" And she said, "Yeah, they named her Melanie."
Oh,
and
wow, that's so cool.
I was like, "Oh, what a cool coincidence."
What an honor, yeah.
And my husband looks at me and he said, "Sweetie, that's not a coincidence." And so I got a hold of Christian, and I said, "So, congratulations on the baby sister." I said, "I heard she has a really pretty name." And he wrote back, he said, "Yeah, she's named after my favorite teacher."
Oh, I'm like crying.
It was
so cool.
Unbelievable. I'm like, I don't need any more awards, accolades. None of it matters. Right there. Like, that's just one more legacy. So yeah, that's incredibly special.
I'm like crying. That's so beautiful. Last question. Looking back, what advice would you tell little Melanie?
Oh, that poor girl. You know what? That's an excellent question, because I have kind of thought about that. I think very simply it would be, give it time. I remember going through, a lot of really hard things kind of all at once, and just kind of like asking, like, why? Like, what is the purpose of all of this? This is too much. It hurts.
Yeah.
And I will say with that I've never been I'm empathetic to people who have mental health issues that are suicidal, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That I feel very fortunate that has never been me.
Yeah.
But I do recall having those moments of laying in bed and just like, why? And really kind of the answer came, and it was to make you stronger. And it was and I have become stronger. And I think the nice thing is at this point, and I've been very fortunate to have built a comfortable life. I have an amazing husband, and we're just such a cool team. He's such an amazing person, that I'm not struggling. I'm not struggling financially. I don't really need for anything, which is very, very strange. I still, like, I kind of pull up to my house and I'm like, I get to live here, and there's like a garage, there's like a house for my cars. This is really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the simplest of things. Like, if an appliance dies, like, really, we're still going to be able to keep everything else working, and we're not going to be broke, and we can replace this with a new thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying money buys happiness, but it can definitely take care of some stability issues.
Yeah.
So yeah, little Melanie, I think she was so sensitive. I think she needed to have a slightly thicker skin.
Yeah.
I think she should have stood up for herself sooner. I was so scared of so many things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it would just be, don't take things so personal. Let things go. Toughen up. Give it time, and it'll all come together.
Awesome. Let's end it there.
All right.
Melanie, we've got about one more minute. Is there anything you want to share? You want to tell your students, share with the world, plug anything you want to? This is your time.
Oh, goodness. I mean, there's so many things. I guess I would just say, do what you love. My mom and I always kind of talked about that we are Renaissance women, which means I'm kind of a dabbler, and we're jack of all trades, master of none, interested in everything. Breathe, love yourself, be your own best friend. Talk to yourself how you would talk to your best friend that really needs you. So I think that would be my advice.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Shane. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. I'm going to close things out. Thank you all so much for listening. Please visit us on Facebook and Instagram where you can like and comment on our posts. If you would want to go above and beyond, please share the CrazyFaceUno podcast with your friends and family or just random strangers on the street. We're welcome to everyone. Once again, please visit CrazyFaceUno.com. You can buy our merchandise and donate. Your contributions help us tell more stories like Melanie's and stories just like yours. Thank you all again for listening. We love you all. Peace!